Hey, Jason Fladlin here for product E-Class Ultima. This focus is going to be on your mindset for success with the curriculum and the training materials available to you in this wonderful, wonderful program. The first concept I want to talk to you about is what I call deadline or dead. Very binary how we're immediately looking at approaching whatever we need to implement and do to be successful with whatever goal that we'd like to achieve. So in this example here, what I've always said, and I've been a firm proponent on, is if it's worth doing, it's worth having a deadline. So if you are attempting to change your financial state online and you're doing stuff that doesn't have a deadline, and it's only stuff worth doing should you have a deadline on, then therefore what's the conclusion? Well, it's pretty obvious, right? The conclusion is nothing should be done that doesn't have a deadline. Not unless you're not serious about your success, right? Unfortunately, if we observed 100 marketers in the wild trying to make money online, we would discover probably at least 95 of them, if not closer to 99 of them, do not adhere to this principle. That if it's worth doing, it's worth having a deadline. So only do stuff that's not worth doing if you don't set a deadline with it. A deadline will be very specifically reining you in to be focused, because the corollary to this is called Parkinson's Law. And Parkinson's Law says the task at hand expands to fill the allotted amount of time. So if you don't set a deadline, then the chances of you getting anything done are slim to none, and they're only done usually by accident. And here's the coolest part of all. A deadline narrows your focus. So that way, you will actually probably get a better product, a better end result, a better output by having a deadline. By constraining yourself, you increase your value. That's very often the case. It's paradoxical, I'll give you that, right? But by limiting yourself, you become more unlimited in your ability. Interesting, huh? So only do things that are worth having a deadline on. Now, the beautiful thing about this is once you measure it in a time unit by having a deadline associated to it, then you can improve upon it. Until you set a baseline down, you don't know what is good and what isn't good. You don't know what you're efficient in and what you're inefficient in. You don't know what to eliminate and what to increase. By having a deadline, then you will have something that will be very powerful to you. So let me show you one insight that can be immediately applicable to your success. What's your study to action ratio? Study to action ratio. And so this is an example of a deadline. So here's the deadline. Any amount of time that I spend educating myself, I should equal in terms of implementation on what I've educated myself. So let's just say you sit down and have 1 hour of free time. Most people will spend that 1 hour consuming 1 hour of education or training or whatever you want to call it, right? And they will leave themselves not budget a deadline that directly follows that of any implementation time. But in this situation, if I had 1 hour of free time to learn a brand new skill, I would cut it up. And I would immediately do this, establish a 1-to-1 ratio. 30 minutes of study followed by 30 minutes of action directly related to what I studied. So now I am setting a deadline. This is a very specific example of a deadline. I am setting a deadline that I will only study for 30 minutes, 50% of the allotted free time, and I will follow it up with 50% of action. Now, this is a deadline you can break, because if you get in the moment and you start doing really good and you got extra time that you magically all of a sudden discover once you start getting in the moment and get momentum, great, that's cool, right? But that's a very specific fixed amount of time that I'm going to dedicate to studying, and it will never surpass the amount of time of implementation. Now, a gentleman such as myself, I'm on about a 16-to-1 ratio. 1 hour of study typically followed by 16 hours of action. A little bit of study, a lot of action. A little bit of study, a lot of action. I don't recommend you start there, but it's something you should aspire to achieve. Now, on the flip side, when I invented, and I invented this, by the way, 1-1-1, one problem, one solution, one sitting. If anybody's taught you that since then, they're probably a disciple of mine. And the one sitting part means a deadline. In this case, the deadline is however long you can sit and knock out a product out. And that is an extremely, what we call a hard deadline, not a soft deadline. It's an extremely ambitious goal. Very often these days, we'll set deadlines for, hey, we have to have this completed by this period of time because we promised the customer this. I don't recommend you start there either because that can put a tremendous amount of stress on you. And if you're not equipped to handle that stress and do your job, it's going to suffer in terms of value. However, this is an example of a deadline that is incontrovertible. You can't change that when it's set out there. So after a while, once you get comfortable, initially it's going to be extremely uncomfortable. Once you get comfortable putting deadlines on every single task that you're doing, then after a while, you'll never function any other way because you will see it's tremendously superior than any other type of operation, technique, or tactic that you can implement. You either have a deadline or you're going to be dead. So anything worth doing is worth having a deadline. So put deadlines on everything that you study and want to implement as a result of study in Product E-Class Ultima. Who you help and who you leave behind. Here's how I view it. I don't know if this is objectively entirely exactly accurate, but it gets me in a mental state that I think is resourceful and conducive to helping provide value to the marketplaces that I serve. What does that mean? Who you help, who you leave behind. Any minute you spend helping somebody directly is a minute you can't spend helping anybody else. There was this very politically motivated policy in the school system in the United States called No Child Left Behind. And the concept was that they basically, at the end of the day, made sure that every single child was catered to, or at least attempted to be catered to in some weird metric that they measured. Heck, I don't know. The concept behind it, though, No Child Left Behind, is this. If one child slows down the other 29 in a classroom to the point where they don't learn anything, maybe that's what they have to do it in the education system, but that's not how we do it in the real world with customers and consumers. Because if we slow down the speed of the crawl to the least common denominator, everybody else in that marketplace that we can serve suffers as a result of that. Now, here's the challenge. Mentally, it's very hard to turn your back on anybody. Most people are good-natured people. Okay, there's studies that basically said 3% of the population are complete sociopathic. They have very hard times feeling empathy for anybody other than themselves. And so they're not good people necessarily. Okay, and then 3% roughly of the population are doormats. Well, they will bend over backwards and let everybody take advantage of them until they die. And the other 94% of the population roughly are in general good-natured people. Now, certain situations and contexts can influence good or bad decisions and good and bad behaviors, right? But in general, most of us do not wish harm on our fellow human beings and do not have or wish ill will to humanity at large. So that's why it's intensely challenging for us to knowingly leave behind a segment of a marketplace, because we wish to and desire to help every single person that we feel like we can help. So I'll give you a very good example of this, and a tremendously good example of this. So my father is just approaching the age of retirement now. And he is a teacher at a high school. And the interesting thing is, when he first started, they had a certain retirement package that all teachers got back then that cost the state of Iowa, where he teaches at, a certain amount of money. That now, if they can process that old man out of the system and bring in a brand new teacher younger than me, like 24 years old or whatever, with a different type of retirement package they have these days, it would save them a tremendous amount of money over keeping my dad on the payroll, right? So it is in my dad's favor to retire. If my dad had retired even a couple years ago, he would have made more money not working than they currently pay him to work. What a situation, huh? So finally, though, my dad, because he doesn't want to get out of his comfort zone, which is a lesson in its own right, my dad decides, hey, it's time to retire. So he sends me an email. And the email says, Jason, this is the last year that I want to teach. I'm looking for doing work part-time that can just, generate between $20,000 to $30,000 a year for me, so that way I don't have to alter my lifestyle in any way, shape, or form, or have to dip into my savings. do you have a Rapid Crush product that can help me achieve that? He straight up asked me that. It's a good question. Because I do. I have lots of products that could help him achieve that, right? But my response to my dad wasn't, okay, yeah, I got these products here, make a go at it. My response to my father was, Dad, I do not recommend at your age, with your outlook, that you take on a brand new startup type of business from the ground up, because the amount of stress involved isn't something that I think would help you achieve what you would like to achieve. Instead, I recommend you go to monster.com and post a resume with specifically what you're looking for, and you'll be able to find work you enjoy that you can do from home, and you can do it part-time and make between $20,000 and $30,000 a year. And my dad actually was like, said, thank you for the answer. So I left my dad behind, quote unquote, in this sense, because I have a skill set where I could show my dad how to make a lot of money online. But I did not feel like it made sense to devote those resources to him in his situation with what he knows and what he's willing and able and capable of doing. And really what his ultimate desires are, right? I made that decision. Now, we can't do this in markets at large because we don't work with each individual at that level, nor do we have the type of relationship to help an individual make that decision. And by the way, if my dad would have came back to me and said, no, Jason, you don't understand. I want to do this. And I said, okay, are you willing to do it? And he said, yes. I said, all right, let's do it then, right? So just because I told him no the first time, if he comes back to me, doesn't mean that we won't help him. Sometimes that's a great example of who you can help. The person who won't give up, the person that has tenacity and desire, will not take no for an answer, right? We'll keep pushing forward. Those are very, very, very good, admirable traits to have, right? But in this particular case is I want to focus and help those individuals who are already moving down the path of building an online business, not so much helping those who have zero experience in it start completely from scratch. So I have to leave certain individuals behind in order to best help other individuals. Most often when you create an information product, you will isolate yourself from most of the market, even if you have the skills and ability to help them. You will have to say no to taking them on as your primary clients and customers of your information products so you can better help and more specifically serve and focus on that small slice and segment that you can provide a superior experience to because you're working so hard and narrowly focused on those individuals, right? So at a higher price point, when you sell goods at the highest end that a marketplace allows, right there alone, price itself cuts off 80% of the market. But did you know 20% of the people in a market spend 80% of that market's dollars? So while it's tough to turn your back on 4 out of 5 customers in that market, financially speaking, it's in your best interest to serve just 1 out of 5 customers in a market. Now, ideally, we serve all of those customers. That's why we start with one problem, one solution, one sitting products, because it's very easy to serve a small segment of the market and have a low price point and be narrowly focused on one specific outcome with one problem and one solution. But as we grow, we will often find typically the people at the higher end of the market, the 20% of the customers that are likely to get 80% of the results. Price is not in their best interest just to focus exclusively and solely on, because then we limit our ability to provide for them certain resources that they might find are helpful to them, and so on and so forth, right? But you have to become accustomed, and eventually you have to become comfortable with knowingly and willingly turning your back on a segment of the market that under the right circumstances you would be empowered to help. But currently you have to trade up and not focus on them to focus on the ones where it really, really, really matters. And overall, you can look at it any way you want, and it's going to be a positive if you analyze it. But it's very easy to superficially glance on it and say, man, if we turn our back on 4 out of 5 people in this market, that's not good. When in fact, that's the best thing you can do for yourself, and that's the best thing you can do for the 1 out of 5 who you do serve. And then after you serve them, you can come back and take another slice of the 1 out of the 5, okay? The map is not the territory. A lot of people doesn't know what this means. That map you see right there on the screen right now, that is not the actual literal territory. It's just a representation of what that territory is. And so very often, how you look at the world, how you view it, how you see it, what you hear and process and feel around it is a representation of the actual world. not the world as it is. Subjective, objective, all that stuff. You say, Jason, well, what's the point of all this, right? Let me tell you what the point of all this is. It's very easy for you to create what we refer to as an impoverished model of reality because of your ability to screw up the map for the territory. Very often I've seen people make a conclusion that they can't do something or something isn't right for them or doesn't work for them after minimum experience and interaction with that thing. See it all the time in marketing. Jason, I can't do information products. Well, why not? Well, I tried it once back in '89 and it took me 6 weeks and I gave up. Okay, so one time decades ago you couldn't do it. So therefore that means you never can do it? The map is not the territory. How you represent what you can and can't do in your head is not reality, because the reality is you can do almost any damn thing you want to do, no matter who you are and what you're up to today, right? But many people are very quick to conclude, and the reality is they look at the map in their mind, they infer that it is the territory, and this creates what we call the impoverished model of reality. Now, this is important for you first and foremost, but here's the beautiful thing. If you truly understand this, and work on it on yourself first, who do you think is going to be more helpful to a customer or a consumer in a marketplace? Somebody who doesn't understand this or somebody who does understand this? And the answer is obvious, isn't it? Because you went through it first. Now you can help a customer when you identify in another individual, this person is limiting how they view the reality and therefore making erroneous conclusions about what they can and can't do, and how they do and do not deal with their problems. And because you've had the experience of helping yourself do this, you're going to be more adequately prepared to help them do this. Now, this is a work in progress for myself as it is for you. It's something that we aspire to always do and understand that how we look at the world is not exactly how it is. And so guess what? If we look at it a different way, we might get a different insight, which then, therefore, leads to a different result. Beware of scope creep. This is very specifically related to product creation, but it's also related to pretty much everything you do in business. The corollary to this is just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. You will have so many more things that you could put into any information product that you create than you ever actually will. I have a list of things that are 100 times as long as what ends up going in a product as what I would like to put into a product. And what makes it and what doesn't make it revolves around several things. First and foremost, the deadline. Because I got to get something out the door, and then later if I want to go back and swing around and improve it, then I can, right? That's the first thing. The second thing that usually goes out the window right away. So the first thing is, if it's a deadline, by the way, only the most important vital stuff gets in and added first. And then everything else can be cut depending on how much time I have left over in the deadline or added later, right? The second thing, too, is we prioritize. Some things are nice to have, but they're not critical. You know, I tell my team all the time that there's 4 levels of task, and that if I don't identify it with them, they must identify it to me. The first level is mission critical. Absolutely must. The product would suffer or would be incomplete without it. Mission critical stuff gets done ASAP first and foremost. Second level, super important. Meaning you could get by with it, but you wouldn't want to. You could get by without it. Sorry. You could get by without it, but you wouldn't want to. Okay? The third level is nice to have, but not required. Because here's the reality. A solution that can help the customer somewhat, and they can get it today, is way better than a solution that can completely help a customer, but they can't get it until 6 months from now. Make sure you rewind and listen to that again if you didn't catch it the first time. So nice to have, but not required is the kind of stuff that would, make a solution better, but should not justify delaying the creation of the product past the deadline you have set. Because then that person has to wait longer to benefit. And while they wait, they suffer, right? So that's level 3. Nice to have, but not required. And level 4 is maybe, possibly, someday. Maybe, possibly, someday. It's nice to have a running total of those kind of concepts and not necessarily put them in. Maybe they're far-fetched. Maybe they're grandiose. Maybe it's way too much effort for the reward. But hey, you never know. One day it might make sense. But that's definitely the first things that we cross off the list. They call this scope creep, because as you add one more thing, as you add a thing into a product or a thing into a business concept or a system, as you add a thing, it gives you the opportunity to add more things onto that thing. So, a phone. And then, okay, we can make a camera for the phone. Okay, well, then we got to have camera software. Okay, what does that camera software do? Well, the camera software can do X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, that's fantastic. Now, but can the camera software and just taking photos, can it also take videos? Well, sure it can. Now, when you run these videos, can you zoom in on them or can you not zoom in on them? Well, we can zoom in on them. Okay, is there any other type of processing that we need to do? Do we need to edit the videos now? Where do we upload those videos? You can see how anytime you add one thing to a product or to a system or to a business initiative, it immediately allows you to add more things to that thing. It's called scope creep, right? So we want to limit, first of all, being aware of it is important because most people are not aware of it. And then limiting it by kind of sorting tasks into mission critical, absolutely must be done. So you start there. Super important, that's next. You get that done. And then nice to have, but not required, is if you can sneak it in before the deadline is up, sneak it in. And then maybe possibly someday, one day. That kind of stuff, you might do it in version 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Like, look at these slides, for example. I didn't start here. This took me 6 years to get to the point where I could simultaneously educate and illustrate like this, right? Be fluid, be rigid. The study of success is very interesting because you will find it is filled with paradoxical conclusions. It's tough. How can you be rigid but be fluid simultaneously, right? Well, you can. It's nuanced, and that's what success is. Success is not the obvious. It's the nuance of the obvious. And so we have to be rigid in deadlines, for example, but we can be fluid in the things that we implement to reach those deadlines. We must be rigid in our unending desire, our unending, not request, why do I keep wanting to say that? Our unending quest to better serve our customers than our competition. That is what we must be rigid in. But we need to be fluid in the ways in which we can serve those customers, right? I'm not saying I can tell you exactly how to know when to be fluid and when to be rigid, but I do believe being aware of this phenomenon will give you a leg up on most people who are trying to do this because they are not aware of this. And so when you get in a situation when you're encountering tension or challenges, you ask yourself here, what do I need to be absolutely rigid about to push through this? And then you ask yourself, what can I be fluid to help me go through this, around this, over this, or under this? And then marrying those two together, these are where breakthroughs occur. Good enough is almost always the best option. Enough things that are good enough, that are done efficiently, will almost always beat everything else. Now, there should be one or two things that you aspire to eventually be the best at. Eventually, right? And then through practice, experience, refinement, reflection, etc., you get that way. But when you're starting, just be good enough at almost everything that you do. Good enough, good enough, good enough. A totality of many good enough things equals tremendous speed. And in any marketplace, speed is a benefit because most customers do it way slower than they should when it comes to solving their problems, right? And then good enough allows you to acquire so much experience that you can connect together in unique ways to be truly great at one or two or maybe three things. And then good enough at everything else. So when in doubt, simplify it. What are the few things related to this task or this item or this problem that I need to focus on, and how can I get them done enough to be sufficient? And then you add them all together, and that's greatness. Art, science. That's what we do here at the end of the day when it comes to making money online. The science can be the step-by-step, but the art is the clever manipulation and adjustment of the finer points of that step-by-step process. Everything I teach you is done in a general approach to reach a mass audience who have a variety of different backgrounds, experiences, with a whole slew of different potential product-specific contexts. And I have to somehow address thousands or tens of thousands of those with some tried and true practical advice, frameworks, systems, approaches, right? Everything I use, consider these guidelines to help guide you to your goal. But the art is realizing and how you can innovate on them, or how you can adjust them to your specific situation, or how you can marry them together in ways that none of us have ever thought about before. That's the art. So just following the black and white step by step and not adjusting to your context or to the market as it shifts and changes around you, it might work, it might not. But at the end of the day, there's some bit of accountability you have to do to yourself to say, how can I apply the science, but do so with a flourish? That's the art, and that's where the money is made. And nobody can put that in a product. They can inspire, they can excite, they can allow you to color in between the lines when they give you the lines. And then you have to be the one that figures that out on when you color in between the lines, when you color outside the lines, and what colors you use, and how you represent your ideas in the real world. When in doubt, just move forward. Okay? If nothing else, movement wins. If nothing else, motion wins. Make movements. Now, studying is not moving. Studying is standing still. Getting frustrated and stopping, that's standing still. Okay? Trying something and failing completely, that's moving forward. That's motion. With education products and information products and building businesses, that's so wonderful that failure is moving forward as long as you make adjustments. But if you don't even know what those adjustments are, try again. First information product you do, it might not be a home run. I hate to tell you that. Probably won't be. But you're moving forward because most people never get there. And then make another one. Try something else. But if you get stuck or slowed down or bogged down, forget it. Forget everything else and say, I just need to move forward. I'm here. I want to get there. What's the quickest, easiest way to do it? What's the deadline I need to affix to this? And then how can I be fluid yet dynamic? How can I appreciate and respect the science but be artistic with my implementation? But as long as I am moving forward, at least with this type of business that we're in, the information business, you keep moving forward, you will be successful. That I 100% absolutely guarantee to you. So let's move forward together through product E-Class Ultima and create amazing, amazing journeys, experiences to reach amazing, amazing destinations. Thank you, and I look forward to serving you throughout this course.